Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome. I am Anjali Pereira, the Disillusioned Medic. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's reflective practice. Tonight's theme is going to be disillusionment. Remember, if you enjoy tonight's reflection, please like, subscribe to my channel and share this with any of your doctor colleagues or even your non-doctor colleagues who are interested in reflective practice. It would be great to get this out there to more people and to hopefully do this more in the future. So let's crack on with the theme of disillusionment. So I thought I would look this one up in the Oxford Dictionary for a definition. And the Oxford Dictionary defines disillusionment as a feeling of disappointment resulting from the discovery that something is not as good as one believed it to be. And I guess this theme of disillusionment is a really big one for me personally, because obviously I am the Disillusioned Medic. I named my blog Disillusioned. Oh, hi, Sophia. Welcome. Nice to see you. Yeah, I named my blog Disillusioned Medic. That word obviously really resonates with me. So I've been thinking back on the time that I left medicine around that time, and why did that word disillusionment stand out to me back then? And you know, we've all felt that at times, right? We've all been disillusioned with the inefficiency and the bureaucracy of the system in the NHS. We all know that it gets used as a political football, you know, at the expense of staff well-being and patient care. But I think for me, I also had some very profound personal moments of disillusionment. And there was one experience that I never talked about at the time because I was so ashamed of it. But so one day I was on call. I was an F1. I was pretty new F1 actually, and it was a super busy shift. And all my seniors were really slammed, and my bleep was going off every 5 minutes. And I kept getting bleeped about this one lady who had decreased O2 sats. Now, this lady was elderly, she was frail, she was very sick, she had COPD, so, you know, low O2 sats were normal for her. So I wasn't too worried. But then I got another bleep to say that this lady was dying. Now, she had a DNA CPR in place, so there was nothing drastic to be done. We weren't going to call the crash team, and even if we did, they were on another emergency call anyway. None of my seniors were answering their bleeps, and I was just this F1 with no idea what to do. And the nurse was looking at me for instructions to tell her what we do next. So we were rushing around trying to get her vitals, giving her oxygen. This lady's BP was plummeting. She was losing consciousness. So I got a line in, and her veins were shot, so it's really difficult. And I ended up stabbing her a few times. Eventually, I got one in, and we started fluids. But I think before even about 1/10 of the way through the bag, she arrested and she died. And that was it. And all I could think about after that was that this lady should have died at home. She should have died in her bed in peace and quiet. And instead, we were just rushing around her in this hospital bed, medicalizing her death completely unnecessarily. And it wasn't that she died that upset me. It was that my presence and my busy interference as a doctor was completely pointless, if not harmful. I felt that I had denied this lady who was dying anyway. I felt like I denied her a dignified passing. And I felt in that moment that that part of the Hippocratic Oath, that first part, primum non nocere, you know, first do no harm, I felt that that was basically impossible to do as a doctor. And in the days that followed that incident, I felt so disenchanted with my entire vocation. And I think that was a turning point for me in this feeling of disillusionment that eventually led to me leaving. So I'm really interested to dive into this theme of disillusionment tonight. And I'm delighted to say that joining me to do it is my wonderful guest, Dr. Gyles Morrison. Gyles left medicine to become a clinical UX designer. He's had a massively varied career as a behaviour change and digital therapeutic specialist, and he's also an international speaker. He's also my friend and mentor of many years, so I'm really, really excited to have him. Gyles, welcome.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. How are you today?
I'm good. A little bit bung up with hay fever, but such is the season.
Yeah, I've got that too. It's great fun, isn't it? Gyles, you were joining us from Ingelheim, is that right?
Almost. So I was in Ingelheim. I'm now in an even smaller town called Badenheim. This is just
Oh,
near Frankfurt, all the way in Germany.
that's fantastic. I mean, just briefly, how are things in Germany in terms of COVID-19, and how has the German response, in your view, differed from the response here in the UK?
Yeah, so things are, I would say, in general, a lot better here in Germany. For sure, the death rate is much lower. I think we've probably reached the 5,000 mark now, which is a lot less than what's happening in the UK, considering our population is more than 10 million, 10, 15 million more people here. We're doing a lot more testing. I think as well, as much as we still have a lot of people thinking, oh, I'm young, I'm not going to die of COVID-19. Generally speaking, people are socially distancing. Particularly when I go to the supermarkets to buy groceries, a lot of people are wearing masks. Most of the time, most grocery stores are insisting you have a trolley to help keep your distance from people, even if you don't need
Oh,
a trolley.
that's interesting.
Yeah. They even give you very strong disinfectant to use to clean the trolleys handlebars. So just to help ensure that they're, reducing the spread. There's also barriers up whenever you go into any of the shops, any of the tills. They've all got some sort of transparent barrier to help just keep your distance, just in case someone coughs or sneezes, things like that. And people are wearing gloves now, even when they go into the shops. So yeah, they're taking it very seriously. I think in
Yeah.
general, it's good how things are happening here. There have been a lot of restrictions on travel. You're not supposed to be walking in groups unless you're actually with other people from your household. Um, Generally, travel around the country is not really encouraged and it's made quite difficult. Public transport has definitely reduced as well. So, yeah, I think things are quite good here. But then I am in a much smaller area, not kind of countryside, as they would say, but even if you were to go into Mainz or Frankfurt, it's derelict. People are not going out. It's really, really quiet because they're staying at home. They're listening to what is being said from government, and we trust what our government's saying. I think is another big thing. Most of us. There's obviously some people who are going to just rebel kind of for the sake of it, but generally speaking, people are listening, and that's keeping us safe.
That's really interesting. I find it fascinating to see the differences of different the different reactions, of different nations. But yeah, let's dive into our theme, Gyles. We're talking about disillusionment today. So you left the health service a year before I did. You left the NHS. I wanted to ask you first, when did you start to feel disillusioned, and what was causing that feeling for you?
Yeah, so I remember it very, very well. So I graduated in 2011. Is that right? Yeah. And when I graduated, I got sent all the way up to Yorkshire. So I studied at Barts in London. So I was born and raised in London. Going to Yorkshire definitely was not on my bucket list, especially of all places. I was never planning to like. Grimsby Fisheries is nice, very good fish and chips, but that wasn't incentive to up and leave London. So, but even with that, like I didn't mind. You roll with the punches, you put up with things like that. My first rotation was in pediatrics, which was a specialism that was very, very important to me. It's one I, for many years, thought I would actually become a pediatrician. Then I was thinking more about ONG and then perinatology, but around that area of medicine was what captivated the most. So I loved my first rotation there. I got a lot of insight into working as a doctor, but also a lot of exposure to what good pediatrics looks like, not just coughs and colds, but seeing congenital malformations, dealing with children's scaboos. An amazing experience. And then I rotated to general surgery with a particular surgeon that was dealing with colorectal surgery. And, you know, I was quite positive. I managed to reach out to the consultant ahead of time. And I was hopeful that this would be a great way to develop my career going into a surgical rotation. Not something I had a lot of experience with before at medical school, beyond the few opportunities to maybe put in a suture into a chicken breast or into, you know, a lemon or something. Yeah. So yeah, and I remember that I went to work on the Wednesday, because changeover day is always a Wednesday. Went to work on the Wednesday. I was really, really sick with some sort of flu bug. Obviously, I was sick. Everybody knew I was sick. So I was then supposed to be on call for the whole day the next day, and I couldn't do the shift. I was just too unwell. And because I was so new to it, I thought, I'm feeling a bit better. I'll at least try to go on the Friday. So that kind of went uneventfully, to be honest. I remember some of my colleagues were a little bit upset that I wasn't able to do my on-call, because they then had to do the on-call. It must have been quite a lot of work. And then I got to work on the Monday. And remember that this was my second job. So I had already been shadowing for, I can't remember how many weeks you do the shadowing before you start, but shadowing was at that same hospital, shadowing in the pediatrics department, then did my first rotation in peds for 4 months, then went into surgery. And I had made friends amongst the other F1s, F2s, SHOs. And so I thought I was part of the family. It was made quite clear to me from the SHO. He sat me down and said, Gyles, we know you don't want to be here. We know you don't want to work here. You know, we don't like working with you. And I'm like, where did this come from? Where did any of this idea that I don't like being here, I don't want to work with you, and you guys don't want to work with me? What? And from then onwards, I kind of just zoned out from the rest of the conversation, because I didn't know why he was saying any of this. And that was particularly bad, because literally that was the day where someone who was a friend of mine for about, what, five months or so stopped being a friend. You know, he was a neighbor. Literally, we lived a couple of doors away from each other from a block of flats, apartments that we were staying in near the hospital. And so I lost a friend that day because of that. We just stopped talking as a result. I never had a healthy relationship with a consultant. Even when I confided in him that, you know, I was confronted like this and I was quite hurt, I didn't know where it was coming from. He just told me to just go and speak to someone about it. And I'm thinking, but I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
And, that was definitely the point where I was like, this isn't for me. Like, this stereotype about surgeons, I don't want to believe that it's true, but you've proven all of it true. Mm-hmm. You know, that you just don't care about people, that you just want to stab them, that you don't really care about their emotions. And I saw that even in the actual way we were doing work. There was a time when we had a lady who, she was a relatively new mum, in the sense that she had twins that were under a year old, I believe, and she had some generalized abdominal pain. So that whole surgical abdomen, so nil by mouth and waiting for scans to come back, so on and so forth. And, you know, she was really upset. She was quite distraught. She was crying because we saw her on the Monday and she arrived in the hospital either Friday night or Saturday morning, something like that. So she hadn't eaten for a couple of days, practically. And so the reg and the consultant at the time were like, why is she so upset? And I'm like, why can't you understand that she's upset because she's not eating, she doesn't know what's wrong with her, she doesn't have any results back, she can't spend time with her family, she's scared. Like, why can't that make any sense to you? You can't just think, oh, but they should be privileged that they've got NHS and they've got, you know, a highly accomplished and successful surgeon to look after them. It's not like that. People don't wake up and like, oh, I wish I was dying in hospital for someone to save me so I can value medical. It doesn't work like that. People want to be healthy all the time. And so I was facing that over those following 4 months, this sort of, you know, very contradictory view of medicine to my own. Like, I couldn't relate to how they were responding to patients and how they were even dealing with me. Patients I got along with very well. And actually, all the nursing staff on that ward I got along with well too. But I suddenly realized that I don't fit in. And that hurt. It hurt because I decided to be a doctor at the age of 14. And, you know, it was nearly 10 years later that I'm realizing this isn't going to work. And for, you know, about another, year and a bit, I thought, well, perhaps I could, you know, become at least a registrar and then think about doing something differently. But by a year and a half in, I realized, no, even trying to go into public health is not going to suffice. I just need to leave medicine. I can't deal with this anymore. I can't deal with seeing patients dying, and they're dying from problems that I would never be able to solve. Or when there's patients who are coming in who are abusing the system, or when I'm having to deal with all these night shifts and long day shifts and weekend shifts and expected to still volunteer my time when I'm thinking I'm already working overtime anyway. Why am I having to do more when there's other staff here? You know, being bullied, being told that you're not good enough and that you're not valued and no one wants to work with you. You know, having allegations that actually you're putting patients' lives in danger and there's never any evidence. I faced a lot of nonsense in the 3 years that I worked as a doctor. And it was a privilege serving patients, but I would never go back. I would never go back.
I mean, I think your experiences will resonate with a lot of people out there, and interesting to know what you guys think. Actually, you guys watching now, if you've had any moments of real deep disillusionment in your work in medicine, and what I really picked up from what you were saying, Gyles, was this idea of there were many factors, there were many things going on, many things that led to you feeling so disillusioned that you eventually left. And that resonated with me because I think I was very similar. For me, there were lots of things going on at the time that I left. I mean, there was the mental health side of things. I think I was depressed. I think I was suffering from anxiety. You know, I was burnt out. I think I was stressed. But then there was also this idea of fit. It's really interesting that you said that you felt you didn't fit in, because I had that exact same feeling of just not belonging in this world, and that was horrible. That's a really difficult thing to come to terms with, when I think we have this idea when we go into medicine that it's such a huge field. You know, there's so much potential, there's so many things you possibly could do. You know, there are so many different types of people within medicine, and you know, and that is true. And so there is the sense that there should be a place for me here. I should fit in, and maybe it's that word "should" that makes disillusionment so front and center, because you feel like the thing that you expected to be there, that should have been there, is just not.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that comes to mind was when I actually applied to medical school. So there was a time where I was very nervous about talking about this, because people used to get very, very angry about what happened and jealous. But it's my history. It's just what happened. So when I applied to medical school, I didn't get all the grades I was expecting. So I didn't get any. Did I get any A's at A level? Something I got an A, and I can't remember now. But I didn't get, you know, the 2 A's and a B that was predicted and what was expected to get into medical school. So they rescinded their offer. I was devastated because the alternative was going to Aberdeen, and I don't eat haggis. I don't like the cold. So that didn't seem like a good alternative plan. But
haggis is not the only thing we eat in Aberdeen. I'm Aberdonian, born in Aberdeen. I'm going to stick up for Aberdeenshire.
Anyway, they had this scheme where you could do a foundation degree and then get back into medical school.
Okay.
And I was more than willing to do that. So I had applied for that. They said that I didn't live in the borough of Newham, so I wasn't eligible. Now, at the time, I was living in Tower Hamlets, which was the neighbouring borough. And in fact, which was really harsh about it, I technically lived closer towards where the main campus where the medical school was, because I was living in Tower Hamlets. And the school and the medical school was in Tower Hamlets, where Newham was next to it. So I'm like, why are you saying that I live too close? I'm not privileged. I come from benefits household. Trust me, I think I should be eligible. Anyway, so I had a second interview for the place. And uh, through that process, that was the first thing that told me that, this medical school is the right decision for me, because they made it quite clear that because I was willing to learn Bengali as a foreign language, living in Tower Hamlets, 1/3 of population is from Bangladesh. So a lot of patients that are served from the Royal London Hospital and a few other neighboring hospitals, which I would have been working at, studying at. Learning Bengali was going to be very useful. I was also planning to do a diploma in anatomy and physiology. So they knew that clearly I wasn't trying to waste my time. I wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And actually, the highest grade in chemistry that year at my school was a D grade, and I got an E. I don't know what went wrong. All I know is that the teaching was terrible. And so they took this into consideration, like, well, actually, this guy's proven that he wants to be a doctor and that he's willing to put in effort. So they gave me another opportunity. And then when I look back at my student file, student record, I saw the notes from my very first interview at medical school. And I would never forget the head of admissions at the time writing, because she was one of the people who interviewed, 3 people on the panel. And she said, clearly has not been pressured or forced into doing this. And she gave me, I feel like it was like a 4 out of 5 rating, 5 being the best. So I was like, there's some faith in that one, because they come across all sorts of people who are applying for medical school. So I never have any regrets applying. Clearly, I did it for the right reasons. And I felt like I was informed enough about the realities as I could, as someone who wasn't necessarily volunteering. I was only 18 when I first started medical school. For all that I had opportunities to learn about medicine, I was given enough about the reality. But the truth is that you have to be willing to put up with ruthless, malicious, horrible, offensive people. And I'm talking about staff, not patients, oddly enough. And obviously, in all industries, you're going to come across people who are not particularly nice. I've faced bullying and aggression and abuse of power in other jobs since leaving medicine, but it wasn't to the scale. For one, wasn't to the scale of what you're facing working as a doctor. I think the second issue is the fact that the context is so different. You would expect that in a hospital, people would be hospitable. We're in a healing profession. People should be there looking after you. But I wasn't seeing enough of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, this idea of hostility, because and also of expectation. You said that you had an expectation of what the realities of medicine were going to be when you went into it, and yet they didn't match up with the realities that you thought would be there. You thought it would be hard, but actually it was hard in a different way, and that's really interesting for me, because so, for example, one of the things that I expected when I went to med school was that when you're a doctor, you'll have to work long hours, right? It will be long shifts, and you'll be working hard, and it will be exhausting. I expected that.
Yeah.
But what I didn't expect was kind of the stuff that went along with that exhaustion. I think I had this idea in my head that there would be sort of camaraderie, and you'd get through it because you're a team and you're working together. And even though you're really, really tired, someone will make you feel better, and you can have a laugh and a joke, and someone will grab you a sandwich or whatever. And in some cases that was true.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me personally, during my foundation years, I was in 4 different hospitals just because of the way things worked out. So I never put down any roots. I was always moving around. I felt like I was just floating, really, and never really connected with people in that close way, with other doctors, with other staff. And even when they were really, really nice, the people that I worked with are lovely, I still felt that extreme loneliness, which made the long hours seem even more exhausting, because I just felt so alone. And so even with, I mean, when you're so young, when you're 17, 18, obviously you don't know what it's going to be like, but even with the expectation that it's going to be hard, I think the difficulty with disillusionment is that you feel like you should have been ready in some ways, like you should have been prepared, and you kind of had it in your head. I thought I would be prepared because people told me this is hard, and it is hard. It's just it's just not hard in the way that I thought it would be. And
Yeah.
for me, that was really tough.
Yeah, I think if you continue working as a doctor, you have to truly love what you do, and you have to put it above a lot. I would say that a significant number, potentially a majority, I can't be too specific, but a significant number of doctors put it before themselves and their family. I know that we talk about vocation, like the work I do now as a clinical UX design, that's my vocation. But it's not more important than my wife. It's not more important than my future children. It's not more important than the legacy I want to leave when the time does come for me to pass on. So I feel that with medicine, there's a lot of times when you do have to see it as the most important thing in your life, bar none. And that wasn't really a sacrifice I was willing to make. I think it's just too much. I think if I did do that, then I would have been willing to put up more with things. But then this is the other concern I have is that actually you shouldn't have to face bullying in the workplace. It's technically illegal.
Yeah. Yeah.
You shouldn't be feeling like you're having to work more hours than you're contracted to do so. Simply because your employer won't pay for more staff. I'm not saying it's as simple as that, particularly in the NHS, it's quite complicated.
No, of course not.
It is or isn't being given. But ultimately, though, there's times when you're expected to volunteer. That's different to, there's an emergency, we need your help. That's a completely different situation. I don't know about you, but I've been there even as, a so-called civilian, been out there and I've seen an emergency. I've gone to help someone been in a car crash, someone's fallen down the escalators, like a really tall escalator on the underground. Like I've been there and you help out. That's an emergency. It's not an emergency that you're coming in an hour before your shift every single day just to put blood results on paper when it can be easily seen on a computer screen. That's not an emergency. That's not even volunteering. That's abusing your staff, pressurizing them to work overtime when they shouldn't have to, just because you want to do stuff that just keeps the consultant happy. They're not God.
It's this idea of vocation sort of abusing goodwill, basically, which is interesting. I'd just like to come to some of the comments that we're getting through. So Malarkey says, just joined, but caught the conversation about fit. My worst time as an FY2 was the loneliness I felt because I didn't feel I fit in. The occasional cruelty of colleagues really cemented that. And Sophia says that the feeling of not belonging is crippling and indeed deeply troubling. What is interesting is that in most cases, it is not medicine itself that pushes us to leave, but rather the culture. And Malarkey's commenting on the hostility of the culture as well. That is so, I mean, I really ring true with that. I don't know if being a doctor was right for me personally. I mean, I don't think it was. I think I didn't belong there anyway. I wasn't meant to practice medicine. But the thing that made it so incredibly difficult was not that it wasn't the right profession and that, you just leave it behind. It was everything around it that made it so toxic. And so I'm wondering whether this idea of disillusionment, it is so pervasive throughout different emotions because I think it connects to so many different things, right?
I think there's a few things that I want to pick up on, actually, particularly that part of feeling lonely. You've talked about camaraderie before as well. There is even my old GP from when I was living in London would say that there is this whole old boys network, and if you're not part of it, you'll have problems. And she's old school, Dr. Livingstone. She knows the nonsense that's faced in this because she's been in the game for such a long time, and she was spot on. Like, if you were not liked by consultants, you're gonna suffer. Not just that your life will be made difficult, they would try and make you suffer. Like, I was off sick for like a week or so, just over a week, with some viral illness, I couldn't get diagnosed because I was doing an infectious diseases rotation. And one of the consultants in formal feedback recommended that my career be ended. Because I was
Oh my God, because you're off sick.
Yeah, I was supposed to arrange cover. I was supposed to arrange cover for me being off. No other profession would ask someone who is on sick leave to find someone to cover them. It's just not acceptable. What do you have an HR department for? What do you even have other colleagues working there for? Like, what do you mean I was supposed, like, this is the sort of things that just enrages you, because it's like you're supposed to be there to look after the patients.
Yeah.
Deal with the politics.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. So Malaki's saying it's weird because I assumed that that's just how it was, and I lacked the necessary resilience. And Sophia's saying that's certainly how you're made to feel, but not how it should be. Toxic really encapsulates it all. And this, yeah, I mean, this is so true. It's coming back to your point about sacrifice, Gyles, and about it somehow being necessary for us to make the sacrifice. And if we're not willing to do that, then you're not strong enough, you're not resilient enough, you're not good enough. For me, this is a systemic problem rather than an individual one. I think we create a culture where sacrifice is, you know, the name of the day. We create conditions that drive workaholism in doctors and perfectionism right from the word go, right from the beginning of med school even. And, you know, personally, I believe that doctors working part-time should be the norm, not the exception, because I think we need to recognize that this is an incredibly demanding career, even more so now than it has ever been, because we are now so super specialized. And, you know, we have to start remembering that the doctors are people with families and interests and passions and pets or whatever. You know, if we don't encourage doctors to see themselves holistically, then quite frankly, we limit their ability to see their patients holistically too, right?
Yeah. I just drawing on that side that there's so much more to life. That's what pulled me towards digital health. I realized that I loved working with computers. I loved graphic design and visual design in general. I still loved helping people, still loved human biology and health in general. But there was this other side to me that simply was being completely neglected. Like, as you know, fun fact, I did Come Dine With Me back in 2013.
Yes, you
And,
did.
yeah, and it was an incredible experience. And I remember, because it was the Christmas show that was being recorded, I had a Christmas menu, but also my entertainment was festive themed. So the church I was at the time, I had some of the guys from there and another one of the medical students come, and we had a wonderful jam session just doing Christmas carols, remixed Christmas carols like reggae and bashment and African beats and stuff like that. It was amazing, absolutely incredible. And I remember when I finished doing the music and all the guests had already eaten, there was a moment where the film crew wasn't around anymore, and I wept. I cried. And remember, this is still part of the show in the sense that the guests were there, so some of them saw me crying. And I opened up a little bit, as much as I could, considering they're in my home and I'm trying to win £1,000. But I wept because it was literally the happiest I had been for nearly 3 years. And it was because I was doing something creative with people who valued me, and I felt like I was part of something. You know, I wasn't at home anymore. I wasn't in a relationship at the time anymore. You know, things weren't quite right in life for me. I thought there was a lot of milestones I wanted to achieve in life, which I wasn't achieving. And I wasn't happy at work. I wasn't being authentically me, apart from at that moment. You know, I love cooking, as you know. I love making music. And I was doing the cooking to survive. I wasn't doing cooking for the fun of it. I wasn't doing music because I don't always play music on my own. I would want to do music with others. And there was a time I was definitely depressed. Even before that, I managed to get out of the depression, try to get back into dating and things, but I was definitely in depression. It's not normal for a young man to, well, there's definitely some people that would do this, but it's not depression, it's just laziness and not being clean. But I remember getting an Indian takeaway and sleeping on my sofa. I had a wonderful large sofa that I could lay on and even sleep on. But I was in a massive apartment. I had a wonderful king size bed I could have slept on. But instead, I was sleeping on the sofa for, I think, 3-4 nights in a row. I'll just go to work, have a takeaway, leave everything on the floor, sleep, wake up, have a shower, go to work, come back, eat, sleep. Like, I wasn't living.
Yeah.
I wasn't living. And I know for a fact there's other doctors who are probably going for a similar situation now who feel trapped. And it's only when I came to the realization that I deserve to have more, and more for me means leaving, that I managed to get out of that. For others, it means I want more, but I still want to be in medicine. And that's hard because you can find a solution to that, but that's hard. But until you realize that you deserve more than just feeling lonely, feeling depressed, feeling like you can't be yourself, if you realize you deserve more than that, until you make that realization, things won't get better.
I wonder to what degree, so what's the connection between disillusionment and that process of growing up and maturation? Because you could argue that, you know, in any profession, in any process, that gaining experience, gaining knowledge about that profession, it will come inevitably with a side of disillusionment. I mean, I'm thinking about the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, you know, first-year medical student versus the jaded consultant who's, you know, been doing it for 20 years and just doesn't care anymore. And, you know, to what degree does understanding the realities of our profession affect disillusionment? And I guess, yeah, is that an inevitability that we just have to cope with?
You always have to pay a cost for things. Like, nothing in life is free. It's not a coincidence that saying keeps being said for so many years. It's the truth. You have to pay for everything. If it's not with money, it has to be with time, it has to be with emotion. Something has to be paid for everything that you get in life. So particularly as a doctor, as you know, even from medical school, it is going to be late nights, early mornings, learning, getting in the books, really understanding stuff, you know, getting in front of patients, practicing procedures, practicing examinations, you know, doing your pharmacology, passing the exams. And then when you get in, it's actually dealing with all the realities of medicine, the long shifts, the bullying, you know, the snarly comments, you know, the bodily fluids in your face sometimes, like all kinds of stuff, right? But there has to be a moment where you're like, this is a cost I'm not willing to pay. I remember watching a wonderful episode of Inside the Actors Studio, which featured Dave Chappelle at the time. And he was just telling the story of a similar situation of, you know, him being told by an older gentleman in his family, just making it clear to him, you know, set the bar of what you're willing to pay. As soon as the price gets beyond that, you can't do it anymore. Just say no. You have to set that bar though. And I think the problem with medicine is that you would never know. Normally, you would never know that you will face bullying. You know, there's times you might even still be told that you could face bullying, but have never faced it. So when it really does happen, you're not fully prepared for it because it's a complete shock to you.
Yeah, and it is your life. I mean, Sophia sums it up here. She says it does just feel like being in a toxic relationship, which you can't get out of because people are financially dependent on the job, which comes with its share of psychological abuse. And when you're in that toxicity, you get caught up in it, you know, and you can't see a way out. So I guess my next point that I really want to talk about with you is, how do we deal with disillusionment? How do we move on from it?
Gosh, I think the first thing that comes to mind is to really understand what has led to the disillusionment. What exactly are you disillusioned by? So it's not just at a high level, this isn't what I was expecting. There needs to be something specific about it. Because that's you getting to the root cause of the problem so that you can identify the best treatment. Just like as a doctor, that's what I love about my industry in UX, is problem solving still. Unless you have an understanding of the root cause, you can never find a true solution or treatment, or even to accept that you can't treat it. another thing you have to know as a doctor is that it's not every disease, not every patient that you can deal with. You know, it's time that you're going to face death. It's inevitable. And
Yeah.
so there's a point where it's like, well, is the source of my disillusionment something I can change? So, for example, the rotation, the specialism that you're in,
Yeah.
the hospital you're working with, the boss that you have at the time, these things that you can actually change. But if it's actually the inherent culture that just does not agree with you, the only thing that you can change is your profession in that situation. You know, you can keep changing the environment, but if the culture is the same, because it's a systemic one ingrained in the industry, you'll have to change profession. And that is not an easy decision to make. And for sure, like vast majority of people that get into medical school, that's their first industry. That's the first job that they will have, particularly in the UK. Even if you've come as a graduate, not all the time you're doing any job beyond a little bit of waitressing or something like that. So actually, you've never had a proper boss like you would when you're working as a doctor. And so you don't know about other industries. You wouldn't know that there's such a great opportunity in digital health. They're starting to change now. I got into medical school back in 2005. Gosh, a long time ago, wasn't it? But back then we weren't talking about digital health the way that we are now. So people are hearing about that, but you're not learning enough about it at school. Like you can't go to medical school and say, yes, I'm going to become a clinical UX designer, and then you start working like that the next day. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that for virtually any other industry. It's going to be quite difficult to change careers. But until you realize that actually what you faced is either something you can change, and then you look about ways to change it, or you can't change the root cause, and then you have to leave. You've got to come to that conclusion. I think that's going to facilitate the next steps for you to be happier with your life.
Absolutely. And I think for me, I'm really seeing parallels between, so the times that I've felt the most disillusioned in my life, and not just with medicine, you understand, times that I've felt like I've really lost faith that things can get better, you know, like in business, for example, and the business world now. And I've had setbacks as well as successes, you know, unlucky events and unfair incidents. And you know, this pandemic is one of them because it's basically flawed my marketing consultancy. But I always have that hope that things will eventually get better, which is why I think that I still stay enthusiastic about entrepreneurship, whereas with medicine, I just didn't want to, I just don't want to engage with that anymore. And maybe we are able to feel faith and hope in some situations more than others. I think potentially because medicine made me miserable, I lost all hope. But with entrepreneurship, it keeps me inspired, it keeps me happy, it keeps me interested and challenged. So I'm able to keep hold of that hope even in times when it's challenging. And I think also maybe it has something to do with that self-development piece as well. But I feel like I've done so much work on myself since I left medicine, having that clarity of what your direction is, your North Star, you know, having that clarity of purpose, what your values are. I think once you have that sense of purpose, it can be quite adaptable. And I think, you know, both are valid reactions. I think my reaction to disillusionment with medicine was to leave, and my reaction to disillusionment in business is to pivot and, you know, change tack. So yeah, I think both are completely valid reactions. And maybe the challenge with disillusionment is knowing the difference between the two.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely something that you commented on, which is part of the reason why you can keep faith and you don't let disillusionment hold you back. It actually propels you, is the fact that you've got a clear vision of what you want. And you can see yourself being successful as an entrepreneur. And I think the other thing as well is from role modeling. If you see other entrepreneurs and you understand the sacrifices that they make, you know, for some of them, they literally hardly sleep, and they're like 3 hours, 4 hours of sleep, and you know they're putting all of their savings, they're remortgaging their house, they're having to use inheritance before it's given to them because their parents haven't died yet. You know, all this sort of stuff, right? There's some of those guys who might still inspire you. I don't want to live that life. So then I get inspired by those who are like, well, I did do a few extra hours after my day job, you know, was finished. And you know, I invested in time for me to reflect and build on my learning, found mentors, and I'm seeing the sacrifices they're making, which don't seem like sacrifices. They seem like logical steps. So I could relate to them. I could be inspired by them. I don't feel inspired when I hear that these doctors had to steal medicine to feed their drug habit, how they're having to have a divorce, how they are, you know, committing suicide, how after doing a night shift, they fatally crashed their car because they were too tired and fell asleep at the wheel. Those don't sound like sacrifices I'm willing to make. And so I said, no. I said, no. But then when I went into digital health, I'm seeing, well, there's people that are, you know, working long shifts. You know, I'm not particularly a drinker. People always going to the pub, but after having a conversation in the pub, suddenly they've got a promotion or they've found new job opportunities. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go have a drink now, aren't I? You know, I've realized that there's things I can go and do which will take me outside of my comfort zone and stretch me a bit more, and having to go and fork out all that money for a master's degree, find loads of mentors, create online presence. I never needed to have a LinkedIn profile as a doctor, but I put myself out there, and now I'm happy with where I am. I'm more than happy. I am overjoyed with where I am with life. I'm a happily married man, living a great life with my wife, wonderful home, wonderful day job, you know, prospects for the future. I'm excited. I feel alive. I didn't feel like that when I was working as a doctor. A few moments when you help comfort a family who's just lost someone, or you help bring new life into the world, or when, you know, you see a patient be able to walk again when they've been bedridden for weeks to months after being in intensive care. You have those fleeting moments of the good you've done for the patients. But it was again outweighed by the nonsense I would have to face from staff, from colleagues, from the culture. And it's like, no, I'm not gonna put up with it anymore. I deserve more. So I claim it for myself.
No, I admire that. And I think in a closing comment, perhaps the irony of it is that the true antidote to disillusionment is not resilience. It's not being better. It's being happy, and not even just being happy, just having clarity of purpose and having a clear vision in life.
Yeah, that's it. Well said.
Gyles, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate having you here, and all the very best with all your ventures. You always smash it. So just so happy and excited to watch your career, as always. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. Just search for Dr. Gyles Morrison. Come up quite quickly on a Google search as well. If you're keen to learn more as well about the work that I do, please reach out or head to clinicalux.org. That's a global community of clinicians, UX designers, other IT professionals passionate about UX.
Fantastic. Take care, Gyles. Speak soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So thank you so much, guys, for joining me tonight. That is all for now. But I will be back next week talking to Chris Hafner about leadership. Then a couple of new dates. So May 11th, I'm going to be talking to Amrita Sen Mukherjee again, the wonderful Amrita. She's going to be back with me talking about the theme of conflict. On May 18th as well, I'll have Evgenia Galinskaya with me to talk about hope. So yeah, if there are any themes that you guys are interested in that you'd like me to cover, then please @ me on Facebook or Twitter @DisillusionedMed. And as always, please like, share and subscribe. Take care, guys. I wish you a safe week and I will see you next Monday. Stay inspired. Bye.